Hello everyone and welcome to Recon Wildlands. Now, a while ago, I made a video regarding the United States Delta Force in Recon Wildlands. Now, recently, I've been looking more and more on YouTube, and I feel that many YouTubers are not necessarily making Delta Force more or less as accurate as they could be. And this mainly stems from a lack of information. Now, Delta Force, real-world Delta Force, is essentially the U.S. military's, one of the U.S. military's top military units. They are trained in black operations, hostage rescue, and I do believe direct action. And they more often than not operate with DevGru, which is SEAL Team 6 of the U.S. Navy SEALs. Now, the main event that really put Delta Force on the map was, of course, the Black Hawk Down incident that happened in Mogadishu in, I do believe, the 1990s in Somalia. Now, modern-day Delta Force has been essentially restructured from that point. Back in Mogadishu, Delta Force was essentially a part of the United States Army. In today's more or less military organizational structure, Delta Force has essentially been tasked as a black operations unit within the U.S. military. It is no longer part of the Army, and in fact, from all reports, it often recruits from other branches of the U.S. military. It is not bound to one specific branch of the U.S. military, like, for instance, the U.S. Navy SEALs are. Delta Force, from what I understand, is essentially the U.S. military's top black operations unit. Now, that being said, DevGru is more or less along the same lines as Delta Force. They, as I said before, often operate together on many operations, but unlike SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, whenever they operate, they're held in secrecy. Very few people know exactly what Delta Force does. There's not really too much that's known about them other than that they do recruit from other branches in the U.S. military. Specifically, I do believe they recruit from the 75th Ranger Regiment quite a bit, and I do know that they recruit from the Marine Raiders quite a bit as well. That being said, I'm going to essentially create a loadout, several loadouts actually, to kind of give you a better idea as to what a Delta Force operative would look like in a modern setting. Because I do believe that a lot of the loadouts that are created on YouTube, especially regarding Ghost Recon, in terms of creating a Delta Force loadout in Ghost Recon, are not accurate to the modernization of Delta Force. So for the first loadout I'm going to actually make is going to be more or less something like this, actually. Now, the loadout that I'm going to try and go for is the first loadout I'm going to try and go is more along the lines of a civilian-esque loadout. Now, the Delta Force often is inserted into a country with very little to minimal tactical clothing. So, more or less what you would have is, for instance, I do believe that we're in Malco right now. In this specific region, probably something that would work very well would be probably a sandstone t-shirt. The plate carrier, I do believe, should be okay. Or we could go with a sandstone, either or. For the pants, the multicam pants could work, or if you want to go with something more low profile, you could always go with, say, cargo pants, sandstone cargo pants. And then for the boots, these are a part of the Special Forces pack, I do believe, which assists me greatly in creating a more immersive loadout for Delta Force. These are the commando boots. For eyewear, I'm going to go with the Oakley straitjackets. I don't believe I'm going to wear a shamag, although you can if you want. I simply don't like how there is no tan shamag or anything like that in the game. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the shamag out. For baseball caps, I suppose I could go with DCU tricolor, because modern, from what I've seen, from modernized images of Delta Force, they do use DCU tricolor quite a bit. And for the backpack, due to my role in this game, I could probably go with DCU tricolor again. If I would want. Now, I am going for more of a low profile look, so I suppose I could instead go with a sandstone backpack. That doesn't really look sandstone, but it's going to have to do. For the assault rifle, I do believe that in quite a few desert environments, Delta Force has used the Mark 17. In this instance, I'm using a Mark 17 with the holographic sight, the EXP S3 holographic sight to be specific. I do have the 30 round magazine. Typically, most Scar H, most Mark 17s do use the 20 round mag as default. In fact, I've never actually seen anyone run a 20 round mag in real life military units. So that would probably be more accurate. Delta Force, and I know for a fact, is getting ready to switch to the G28, which is basically a HK417, which has been highly modified. It is essentially replacing the M1110, which the M1110 was basically a highly modified SR25 style platform. This looks very similar to the SR25, but it is less bulky, and it is I do believe it is lighter, and it's also been modernized quite a bit. I do believe it has a free-floating barrel inside the weapon. Yes, it does. So, or at least the game texture-wise, it looks as if it's a free-floating barrel. Basically, it's supposed to be more reliable. It's supposed to be more accurate. Basically, it's just an entirely, more or less modernized variant of a sniper rifle platform. Now, Delta Force has to load themselves down to be more or less multi-role. However, they don't want to load themselves down too much, so what I'm going with here is more or less just a multi-role type of loadout where you can engage targets from either short to medium range with the Mark 17. This will put targets down fast. It shoots the 7.62 by 51mm round. 7.62 by 51mm round, there you go. If you're ever curious what your rifle actually fires, that's a quick way to actually learn. Go down to the magazine of your weapon and you will know what round it's actually firing. Very useful tip. And for the handgun, Delta Force in real life uses the Sig Sauer P320 quite a bit and several Glock platforms. Now, I do not have a Sig Sauer P320 in this game. The closest gun that Ubisoft actually gives you in terms of sidearms is the P227. Now, I do not want to use the P227 simply because the P227 is more or less a conceal and carry handgun. Now, for stealth insurgents, I suppose if you were true Delta Force, more or less, if you're inserting into an urban area, you could probably conceal and carry a P227 with a few attachments on it, maybe an upgraded trigger guard, and you could actually be very, very effective. Now, in this game, obviously, that's not possible, so for now, we're going to go with the P12, which I do believe is a H&K firearm. It is a very, very sleek. I have it in, I do believe, Coyote Brown, except I have the entire weapon painted Coyote Brown. I'm not a huge fan of the multicolored parts. I think in real life that Delta Force more or less would try to camouflage their weapons as much as possible, and they are Tier 1 military operations, just like DevGru, and DevGru modifies the crap out of their weapons. So, this is essentially my loadout for a more casual contractor look, which Delta Force very often, if they are not in country, if they're not legally supposed to be in country, they will look very similar to contractors. So, this is essentially what the loadout is going to look like. Now, as I said, you can go with DCU tricolor or something like that if you would prefer. And actually, if you would want to change things up a little bit, because I'm not a huge fan of the cargo pants in this game, you'd always go with the 511 pants. They fit a little bit better, and they look a little bit more professional. Now, I do wear knee pads. The main reason why is because in real life, high-speed operators always want protective gear on their knees. The chance of you having to go prone very fast is, highly likely, and the last thing you want is to scrape the crap out of your knees, get open wounds, basically, and it's just not good. Especially if you're going to be in a jungle environment, you do not want open wounds in a jungle environment. It's not too bad in an environment like this, for instance, which closely mimics Afghan-style environment, actually. At least from what I've seen. I've never actually been there myself, but it does seem to mimic either a Iraq or Afghanistan-style environment, or Pakistan, for that matter. So, the next loadout that we're going to be going for is more or less I'm not really too sure what's up with my Scar H right there. Interesting. I think that might be a texture glitch, actually. Let's find out. It is indeed. It is a texture glitch. The 20-round magazine looks like the 30-round magazine, and the 30-round magazine looks like the 20-round magazine. Interesting. That is very interesting. Alright. Now, for more of a operator look, Delta Force, from what I've seen, uses a wide array of gear in terms of special operations tactical gear. Now, for this particular environment, we're actually going to go with ATAX AU. I have actually seen images of Delta Force operatives using these kinds of, or using this kind of gear. Now, for this instance, you could go with the IBA or you could go with the plate carrier. I do know that Delta Force is very high speed, so the chance of them wearing just a simple plate carrier in real life would be more realistic. And I am using the Cry Precision Combat Pants, which is very, very often used by not just Delta Force, but also DevGru, and obviously your other special operations units inside the U.S. military. For the eyeglasses, I'm going to go with the Dark Bone Gray. For my face wear, I do not believe I'm going to wear anything. I am, however, going to wear the Not that helmet, but the advanced ballistic helmet. And I'm going to wear it in ATAX AU. For my headset, I am going to wear it in Stand Stone. Now, some people prefer using headset A. I personally don't like using headset A simply because headset A is essentially an older variant of headset C. Headset C is a more modernized, sleek look. It does have integrated hearing protection built into it, which is something that you would see Special Operations Forces use a lot because they want to keep their hearing. Alright. And then, due to my role, I'm going to go ahead and wear the standard issue backpack in ATAX AU. Now, for the rifle, in this instance, I do believe that, technically a Mark 17 would still work, but I'm going to go with something a little bit different, just to kind of show the type of weapons that they do use. I'm going to go with a more assault type of loadout, so I'm going to go with a Remington ACR. There's two different variants of the ACR, actually. There is one made by Bushmaster, which I do believe is the civilian variant, which is, I'm actually going to try and get in real life for myself. And then, of course, there's the military variant, which is made by, Remington. So, two different variants of those weapons, and they're both very, very good. Now, for this environment, I'm going to go with a tan paint job, and I'm also going to tan up the barrel and the suppressor. Again, I feel like in real life that these are the types of things that they would go with. Now, for secondary weapons, it would probably make sense if I went with a, let's see here, now another problem that I have with this game is they don't really give you a wide array of shotguns. Now typically a member of Delta would be carrying a breaching shotgun, typically depending on the mission at hand. I suppose for this instance what I could go with is I could go with a MP7, and I'm going to fold the buttstock. I'm going to put the micro red dot sight, I do believe, is gun, so I think I might go with the red dot sight, the panoramic sight instead. I'm going to get the 30-round magazine. Now, typically the MP7 in real life has a 40-round magazine. I'm not really too sure why Ubisoft put a 30-round magazine in the game. I'm assuming for balancing purposes, but I'm not 100% sure. They may have just overlooked that, and they just never really went back in to fix it. That is a very real possibility. I'm not really too sure. I haven't really asked Ubisoft about it. So there you go, the MP7. That is going to be my backup weapon, more or less designed for CQB. And then again, for the handgun, now Delta Force in real life hardly uses any of these weapons. Now, I have seen them use the P45T, which is made by FN Herstal. I do believe now in game, of course, this is a very this gun's actually very beat up. There we go. That gun was very beat up. In real life, I do believe quite a few special operations units use this weapon. However, as I said, most special operations units use the either a, let's see, they either use a Sig Sauer P320, a Sig Sauer P226, or they use a H&K handgun such as the P12. Now, the Delta Force I have seen use the 5.7 in training. However, in real life military operations, there is no need for them to carry a handgun. that basically penetrates body armor. Now, I'm sure if Delta Force is involved in a mission against ISIS, it would make more sense considering I have seen ISIS members use light plate carriers, but again, a light plate carrier can easily be penetrated by a 45, so again, we're going to be going with the P12. This is my go-to handgun in this game, actually. It is a very, very sleek handgun, very easy to control. It is kind of heavy, so it does make the reload a bit slower, and the fire rate is a little slower as well. Now, the good thing about it is the recoil on this gun is not particularly bad in comparison to, say, the 1911, which I do love the 1911. However, I do prefer the P12 a lot more or less because the P12 is a modernized handgun. This 1911 is actually it's essentially it doesn't even have tritium sights on it, which is a big no-no to me. I'm not a huge fan of standard iron sights. I do like tritium sights. See if I can line that up right there. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Iron sights are lined up perfectly. So, in this instance, I do use the P12 quite a bit. Due to the environment, I am going to change the coloring on the weapon. I'm going to change everything to tan. And that is more or less something that you would see a Delta Force operative use in a tactical situation. I have seen Delta Force also use the HK-416. That is actually the primary weapon they use, which is the P-416. The main reason why I do not go with this gun in-game is the gun is essentially crap. There's not too much good about this gun in-game. I mean, it looks good, but if I'm going with a truly immersive loadout, the P-416 would more or less be the type of weapon that you would want to use. Now, I do know that Delta uses a combination between the short barrel and the standard barrel. It depends on the operation at hand. I do know this weapon in real life is very flexible. It's made by Heckler & Koch. It is a very, very, very good weapon in real life. On this game, however, it is totally different. Instead, what I typically use if I'm going for this type of loadout is I use the Remington 5, also known as the R5 RGP. This is essentially a lookalike to the 416. And this is typically what I use in-game in replacement to the 416. Now, they are made by different companies. This, of course, is made by Remington. The other is made by Heckler & Koch. And as you can see, it looks very, very similar. The only difference is the longer barrel length, which actually assists at keeping the barrel down at long range. My only problem with this weapon in the game is it has a automatic trigger only. You cannot go semi-automatic with it. However, for longer range shooting, this weapon is very, very accurate. Now, I wouldn't say super long range, as in sniper rifle distance, but medium to long range with this weapon is very, very viable. Now, other weapons that Delta tend to use, let's see if we can find one. Now, Delta no longer uses the M4A1. Now, in real life, what they do use is a weapon called the, it is made by Daniel Defense. It is called the Mark 18. It is essentially a modernized variant of the, basically the M4A1. The barrel length is a lot... Let's see if I can actually click on the right one here. It's essentially a lot shorter than this. The stock is completely different. The overall inner functions of the weapon are completely different. The Colt M4A1 right here is totally different than the Daniel Defense. Or actually, I do believe, I've been told by several people this is either a Daniel Defense M4A1, which is very possible, or it's a Colt M4A1. I would prefer it to be a Daniel Defense M4A1 for obvious purposes. The Colt M4A1 has essentially, it's a very old weapon, and the U.S. Army, the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Coast Guard, they're all looking for replacements of the M4A1. I do know the Marines are slowly phasing out the M16 platform, simply because the weapon platforms are they're too old, more or less. They do need the overall platform is okay, but the inner workings of the weapon are the main concern here, because jamming from both the Colt M16 platforms and the Colt M4A1 platforms, they're very, very prone to jamming. Whereas more modernized variants of the platform, such as the P416, which is what it's known as in game, or outside of game in real life, the HK416, it is much more reliable than the M4A1 will ever be, or at least the Colt M4A1. Now, of course, a better variant of this right here, of course, is the ACR. This is the weapon that I tend to go with, and Delta Force exclusively, as far as I'm aware, uses this weapon. I have not seen DevGru use this weapon personally. Most of the firearms that I've seen DevGru use are Daniel Defense platforms, such as the Mark 18. Now, that being said, I could be completely wrong. I'm totally okay with being wrong, because Delta Force and DevGru are both very, very difficult to research on in terms of specifics. You can find out all the basics, but specifics in terms of weapons is very, very difficult. Alright, so I do believe this is going to, I do believe I ran out of time here. I'm actually curious to see how much time I have left. I do believe I'm going to have to cut down this video, because I do believe this video is going on for almost like 45 minutes here. So I am going to make a second part. This is essentially my rehashed version of the Delta Force loadout here. This is essentially a assaulter style loadout. I am, in the next video, going to go over different tactical loadouts for Delta Force, and to kind of give you an idea how these guys actually operate. Now, this is, of course, still a loadout video. I will not be showing too much action, really. In fact, I'm probably still going to be in the same menu. My main idea is to essentially give you guys the tools to essentially create a loadout similar to Delta Force. Now, I am going to be swapping out camo in the next video as well, because I do know that Delta Force uses DCU tricolor, they use ATAX variants, and they use Cryptek variants. They also use multicam variants. Delta Force uses a wider range of camouflage patterns in their tactical gear, depending on the environment at hand. So, I'm going to go ahead and end this really quick. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.